China will hold its largest military parade ever next week to mark 70 years since the founding of the PRC. The Chinese Defense Ministry says that 15,000 troops will march next week and 580 pieces of military hardware will be displayed.
Reports say a centerpiece of that parade is likely to be the Dongfeng 41 missile, which is the first Chinese intercontinental missile to carry a heavy payload and to cover the entire U.S. territory. Now, for more on the PLA's modernization, we are joined in studio by Dr. Benjamin Ho, Research Fellow at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies. Dr. Ho, thanks for joining us. Now, we've seen China under Xi Jinping's leadership sort of prioritize, if you like, the transformation of its military. Why is he sort of undertaking that strategy?
I think it's part of this broader narrative of the Chinese dream, which was spoken by Xi Jinping a few years ago when he came to power. I think part of this Chinese dream is that in order for China to be rich and prosperous, you've got to have a strong and powerful army. So I think in light of that, it's very much linked to the whole entire concept of the CCP legitimacy to rule China. And I think if you look at the PLA, there is this focus both on internal stability and external security. To this end, I would argue that the PLA represents that external front, the front which is made visible to the wider world, to project that face of China being strong, being prosperous, being powerful.
Xi Jinping has said that he wants the People's Liberation Army to be a world-class force. So how would you assess that? I mean, has it reached its target?
Well, certainly you see a far more confident and capable PLA in the past decade or so. So you've seen Chinese PLA undertaking missions far beyond China itself. So that reflects actually a far more confident face of the PLA. But I think having said so, we need to recognize that the PLA is huge. It's got 2 million servicemen and women serving. And I think part of the challenge is how do you actually coordinate to ensure coordination among this huge 2 million soldiers across the provinces of China. I think that is one challenge. Of course, the other challenge, as we all know, is anti-corruption. That was a problem that when Xi Jinping took power, he wanted to eradicate. So I think that anti-corruption efforts are still ongoing even within the PLA.
Yeah, and that led to a purge of 100 generals. It was quite a thing. Yeah. Of all the branches, though, of the PLA Navy is perhaps one that is, they've been quite proactive in their activities. So as we've seen, sort of been navigating waterways, South China Sea and the East China Sea. Do you see that as being also tied in with China's sort of economic strategy?
Well, I think certainly given China's maritime interests and also the Belt and Road Initiative, where so much of Chinese economic national interests are now not just within China but outside of China, the PLA Navy would certainly represent that phase in which to ensure that these interests are being preserved and protected beyond China's shores. Of course, there's also that longer goal for the PLA Navy to become a blue water navy where it is able to operate far beyond Chinese territories.
Let's talk a bit about China's nuclear ballistic missile capability, because its military modernization has really seen this growing arsenal for China of what it's capable of. How would you assess that capability?
Well, I think the real issue here is not just capabilities per se, but its intentions. Because you could have a strong, you could have missiles, you could have a strong military force, but I think the question is, what do you want to do with these forces, these assets? And the question of intentions, it's certainly something that, I suppose you would say that the Chinese would have to come out and say that, okay, these are purely for defensive purposes. Some countries may feel otherwise, but I think those are the tensions when it comes to Chinese military and the kind of technology that we are seeing these days.
But nonetheless, the Pentagon has seen it as a point of concern. Other weapons developers have seen this growing arsenal as a point of concern. Yes,
certainly. So I think therein lies a sort of security dilemma. If you ask the Chinese, many of them would say it's really just to protect our legitimate national interests outside of China. But if countries like the U.S., countries within the region might look at it and say, no, that represents a threat to our own interests. So how do you actually square that I think those are questions in the coming years we will see that would generate further dynamics between China and the countries around her.
Yeah, and that sort of ties into my next question about foreign policy. Yes. And you say, how does it square? Because when you see sort of a country sort of growing its military force and also becoming sort of more assertive in this sort of political, in the foreign policy sort of space, yeah, it's going to raise eyebrows, isn't it?
Yes. So I think it goes back to the first question that we were talking about. What exactly is China's military modernization? What purpose does it serve? And my reading of it is that back to the whole thing on preserving internal stability and ensuring external security. So to that end, China's military modernization would represent a tool to achieve those twin foreign policy objectives. You could also make that argument that China has far more overseas interests now, legitimate ones, and it wants to ensure that these interests are being preserved. And only the military would have the capabilities to do that.
And we're going to see quite the parade, aren't we?
Yeah, certainly.
In a few days' time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks so much for coming in and speaking to us. Dr. Benjamin Ho, Research Fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies.